Welcome to this Eden webinar, where we're going to look at using interactive live broadcasts for developing students' practical skills. My name is Fiona Aiken. I'm a senior lecturer with the Open University in the UK, and I have three presenters here with me today. I have Trevor Collins, who's a senior research fellow from the Open University in the Knowledge Media Institute in the UK. I have Sarah Davis, who is a senior lecturer in environmental science with the Open University, and I have Janine Madison, who's a postgraduate researcher from the Newcastle University in the UK. So welcome to everybody joining, and welcome to our speakers. And I'll hand over first of all to Trevor, who's going to talk to you about, will present how a webcasting platform used at the Open University called Stadium Live has been developed to engage students in live interactive learning in different settings. Now, we've got the three speakers today, so each person will talk for around 15-20 minutes, and then we will have time for Q&A at the end. So I'll now hand over to Trevor.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Fiona. That's great. I'm hoping that folks are able to get in okay. Please use the chat. If you want to use your camera, that's also great. It's always a lot easier when you can see people to talk to than just talking at that blank screen. So please use the chat. Let's make this as interactive as we can. Having said that, I'll share my screen with a few slides and stuff, and we'll get going in a moment. Let me bring this up. We are now, and again, it'd be helpful, folks, if you could just confirm for us there if that's displaying all right and that you can see the chat okay.
I can see it okay. Thanks, Trevor.
Oh, wonderful, brilliant. Thank you very much, Fiona. And all can see the chat's taken off. That's exactly why we're here, folks. And do tell us where you're from. Canada, Cyprus, Ukraine. Amazing, wonderful. This is great. So let me say a little bit. Move. Yeah, great. Okay, so my name is Trevor Collins. I'm a senior research fellow, as Fiona introduced me, at the Open University in the UK, which is based in Milton Keynes, just north of London. I'm also the director of a thing called the Open STEM Labs, which is part of the Open University, and it's the way in which we do the practical and practice-based learning. So quite a bit of the work that we're going to talk around today, around the way that the OU in particular, and Janine will be speaking about some work at Newcastle University as well. But when we're talking about the OU, some of it is around our practical work. Now, the context will be STEM subjects, but this approach should be applicable across all subjects in distance education and online learning. So I hope it'll be interesting to everyone. Do please come in with comments and things as we're going through. The idea, again, as Fiona had mentioned, was we'll start with a few of these little presentations just to give you some discussion of the work that we're doing here, some context for the work we're doing here, and then at the end, plenty of time for discussion. So my piece on this is a system that we use called Stadium Live, which was something that was developed at the Open University that I've been involved in. The idea with this is, as you can see in the illustration there on the slide, there's a small video window and students can bring that up larger if they wish to. But alongside that, there's a chat window and there's a little, you can see in the bottom left-hand corner there, some what we call widgets, but just little question and answer polling tools that we use that enable us to make it interactive. And really that's the focus for the little piece of this that I'm going to explain now. So I hope that'll be helpful. So let me say a little bit then about about what I'm going to cover. So I'll say a little bit about the context, the Open University in the UK. I'll say why we've been using live web broadcasts as part of our approach to delivery for distance learning and online learning. And then I'll explain a little bit about how we're using that in the STEM subjects. I mentioned that we're based in STEM. For some lab work, which we call labcasts, and field work, which we call fieldcasts. And it's Sarah that will pick that up and talk more about that when she speaks to you as well. After setting up the application for it, I'll explain the system that we're using, Stadium Live, and as I say, that was one of the things that I was involved in developing with colleagues at the Knowledge Media Institute, which is part of the OU. And then I'll finish by bringing some reflections together around why we've been doing this work, what we've learned from the process, that type of thing. And I'll leave you with a few thought prompts, a few little questions to seed the discussion afterwards, folks. So, you know, as I say, we're not necessarily taking questions as we go through. We'd like to kind of move through these as ways for food for thought, and then do make notes and comments and thoughts about that in the chat, or you know, make notes on locally, and we'll bring them into the discussion at the end, sort of panel discussion piece at the end. So let me start there at that beginning bit. The Open University, the context that we're talking about, at least, and we're just sharing our context. We're really interested in hearing everyone else's as well, and the context that you're working in as well. So do please bring in that into the discussion. The Open University, we're mainly based, the main campus is in Milton Keynes. We also have national centres in Wales, Scotland and Ireland. And there's about 200,000 students that would be studying with us. About 70% of those students would be working full or part-time alongside their studies, and about a third of the students, or at least the new undergraduates, so people coming in, tend to be actually about a third of them are under 25. So it's a sort of changing demographic in terms of the students that we're reaching within the UK. So that's a little bit about the context, so the scale of the institution. With the structure within us, we've got 4 faculties. That's the way that we're divided up. There's an arts and social sciences. There's a business and law faculty. There's a faculty of science, technology, engineering, and maths, and then there's a faculty for wellbeing, education, and language studies. That's just the structure that we've got. Every institution will have their own structure for that, but it sets to some extent the way in which we divide the subjects up and work together as well. So certainly that's just the context. And as I said, Sarah and I's context for this is the STEM subjects, but we do work with colleagues across the other faculties as well. And there's opportunities for us to very keen on hearing about other examples and other contexts where this kind of approach might be applicable, this idea about using live broadcasts. So the OU, for those of you that may not have came across it, it has a particular approach to distance learning, which we refer to as supported open learning. The idea is that our courses are fairly flexible. Students can study them alongside other things, be employment or other responsibilities, caring or other responsibilities they may have. The idea is that our course materials are all inclusive, so students receive everything that they need in order to complete their studies, and they get then supportive. It's the support from their associate lecturers, the person who would help them and guide them through the course, as well as mark and give them feedback on their work. We also have student support teams that guide people in terms of course choice and study skills. And we also have a career service as well that would support our students in terms of their career aspirations and choices of courses. So quite a lot of support that we're putting in there alongside person-based support, alongside the written materials and the online resources. And the final point there in the supported open learning approach is that it's social. We sort of see social as learning as a social process, you know, the interaction between people, between learners, students working together or students working with their tutors. Sometimes, and quite a lot of the time, that's an asynchronous interaction, but it's, you know, certainly something for distance and online education that we're all interested in and all familiar with. But that social thread is one of the things that we'll pick up through today, because this idea of us using live broadcasts actually is building on that thread. So again, it'll be helpful to get people's view on that. So the live web broadcasts, they're part of this idea for us to sort of demonstrate, and in our context, it's the practical or practice-based learning. So lots of different subjects would be wanting to prepare people for their professional practice, and there'll be ways in which we want to integrate that into the education that we provide, and give people those practical skills that would put their the theories into practice. So it's certainly a core element of the way in which we deliver our courses at the OU, I'm sure at other places as well, but it is one part of the course. So it's very much part of a blended approach. Colleagues that were involved in developing this approach with us would sometimes refer to this as students gathering around the front bench. And it's that kind of discussion and showing and sharing work that we wanted to explore through live web broadcasts. So we can pre-record material and send that out, and students can see time-based media where things change over time and we're demonstrating things. And if they can be pre-recorded and sent, that's great. That works really, really well. But it's the discussion-based, it's the interaction. That's the reason for doing something live. And that's the reason why we've kind of invested in this a little bit. So again, it'd be really, really good to hear if other people are trying this kind of approach in the ways that you might have experience of, or even if it would be applicable in other people's context, it would be really good to know about that. So that's the context, that's the work that we're setting up in terms of these live broadcasts and why we've been doing it at the OU. I'll say a little bit about how we're doing that in the STEM subject specifically. So the lab work and field work that we do, you know, distance learning to do practical work in the labs and practical work in the field, either needs to be organized as a residential or as a visit to a particular lab or a field site, or it needs to be done in some other way, some asynchronous or synchronous way. So the approach that we've been developing is through these broadcasts is to make a live video that students can watch, and at the same time they can respond to questions from the presenters using the text chat and the polling widgets. We introduced in 2014, so been running for about 10 years, and we're using about 30 events. We're supporting about 30 events each year across the STEM subjects. So there's about, I should know the number of modules that are using it, but there's usually 2 or 3 events per module. So whatever that would be, I guess there's 10 or 12 modules that are using this, I suppose, across the STEM curriculum at the moment. Although the system for developing it was produced in the Knowledge Media Institute, where I'm based, we've got colleagues in other parts of the university that actually have taken on the system and do that as a service to the module teams that are producing and delivering courses. And that's called the Science Web and Interactive Media team, and they're supported through part of that Open STEM Labs, that element that I mentioned around the practical work. So you can see there on the right-hand side, a couple of illustrations where we've got our teaching labs. In the background there, you can see a couple of black cameras. They're probably not very large on that image, but it's that kind of setup that we've got. So we've got teaching labs where we're demonstrating stuff, we're asking the students questions, we're asking their opinion on things, we're asking them to make predictions, and asking them to make observations and interpretations. So that way, we're trying to create an active learning process, engaging people in a process of that brings the module materials to life. So that's where we're at. So you can see in those top images, it's the lab-based stuff. The images at the bottom, there's one on the bottom left there, which is a computing area. So it doesn't have to be a lab necessarily, but it's demonstrating some of the computing equipment, parallel computing in that case with Raspberry Pis, I believe. And the one on the bottom right-hand corner is around field work. And again, it's this video production in the field, but in a way that students can be part of and be involved in because it's interactive. So that's the setup. That's great. The next piece then, I'll explain a little bit about the system and then a little bit about the reflections. So the system itself, how we've developed it, it's a video stream. You can see in the illustration, the top left-hand side there is the video bit, which can be made larger by the students. For that, we use existing streaming services like Vimeo, or there's a EACEA media service that we can run on our own servers as well to enable that. The widgets, the piece you see at the bottom left-hand corner there, those are done through JavaScript, and it's a way of doing a push technology. So rather than a web page that's pulled every time we request a page, it's pushed out information. So these widgets are updated automatically as soon as anyone responds to the question. And that's quite a powerful thing for this, in that when we ask the students to respond, as each student responds, the illustration gets updated to have the results from everybody that's participated. So there can be several hundred people. We've had sessions of these with hundreds of people involved. So they're designed in such a way that it can be that level of communication in terms of coming back to the presenters and actually all the other students as well, see the results as well. And then the web interface for it is put together just with scripts, PHP, HTML, JavaScript, those kinds of things. So that's the layout for that. The widget library itself, we have a map layout, and that was a way of enabling people to identify whereabouts in the world they're joining us from, typically within the UK. And the idea with this is they just put a little red dot on the map to illustrate where they are. But as everyone puts their dot on the map, the whole map appears, fills in with these little dots as a way to feedback. We usually use this map widget at the beginning of each broadcast, and the reason for that is if the students are able to put a dot on the map, then they've already learned the interface to the system. There's no other technology that they need to, there's no other challenges in terms of this. Being asked questions, they're responding to it with a point and click interface. So that's generally pretty stable, works very well, very predictably. We also have a menu of question types, so multiple choice questions, a continuum where we're asking people to put a point along a linear scale, Wordle where we're asking people to type in phrases or words, and then we collate them by frequency, and a balance where maybe we've got a yes/no kind of question, we're asking people to make a choice between two options, and the balance then animates effectively to show which one's got the highest vote. So those are the kinds of widgets and things that we use. I'll very quickly, and I will be quick on this, just show you the interface, just to give you a little bit of the context for this. So I'm hoping again that that's displaying on your screen. So maybe let us know in the chat or give us a thumbs up or something if the slide is now changed to a web page that says Stadium Live. I'm hoping that's displaying for everyone. Maybe somebody, yes, thank you, Jerry. That's wonderful. Never know what's coming through at the other end. Okay, so this is what the students would find. We post these links and the students are able to access this. As long as they've got an account with the university, they can come in. I'm just showing you a demonstration site here. Students would typically enter. Video, as I said, would be shown in the top left hand here. This is the widget area. And again, students are just clicking on these, making them larger if they wish to. And they can click on anywhere. I happen to be from Ireland, so but that's my original home place, although I'm based in Milton Keynes now, which is over here somewhere. So, but that's the effect. And as everyone answers these, the map fills up. That was the example that I was giving you before. There's also examples here where we have things like the multiple choice, where we're asking people which modules they're studying, and they can choose from that. They can change their mind. It doesn't matter. And as whoever responds, the overall results are summarized here. There's the balance widget, just to explain a couple of choices on these things and the animation effects. So you see here, very straightforward in terms of interaction. The chat area as well is just a good way, as we've done today in Zoom, is using the chat as a really helpful way to get those salutations, to get a sense of kind of connecting stuff as we're online. Okay, so that's the main web interface. I've still got a minute or two. I'll explain, and literally that's what the students work through. You know, we're presenting here in the video area. Students, when they're asked to, they respond to each of these widgets, and there's a bit of back and forth with the text chat. Okay, so that's the format. That's the technology that's used. In order to set this thing up, there's an administration interface, and we've got this pre-populated. This is the demo event that we're currently in. I can change the title, change the description. I can change the date of it and go through. And this is this menu of different widget types. And these are the ones that I've pre-selected. And then I can preview the web page as well. There's a little event page there to preview that. But that's for the one that we've been in. So you get a sense there. The academics would come in, we pre-populate this with the questions that they want. They can change these things if they wish to. So for example, let me pick one of those multiple choice ones and make an edit on that. I can change the whatever I would want to here, which is taken on. I have no idea, you know, whatever. But it gives a sense of the academics can change that if they need to. But we would make any of those changes prior to the event, you know, and that would be then reflected in the system. We don't really want to be changing those when people have started, as you can see there in that demo site that the text is changed. So very straightforward in terms of the interface. The other thing just to mention on this, just because I got a minute, is the analytics on it as well. So for some of these events, you know, as I mentioned, there may be a number of users that will access the recording of this because they're not able to join us live. And there'll be a certain proportion of students that will be able to participate in the live event. And that's just the nature of the distance learning. But for this particular example, you know, we've had 621 users on this, 222 of those were during the live event, and then there's been 589 post-event. And that's a very kind of useful statistic for the module team because they know how many people are engaging in the way in which they're going. When people are connected, this little connected graph illustrates what's happening. Oh, we're getting a bit of queries in the chat here, folks. This is great. How long is an average event? Fabulous. I've asked for, initially I'll push for 20 minutes, and that's kind of gone to half an hour. And then if I'm not involved, folks will sneak it up to an hour when I'm not watching. It's very typical. But we try to focus people to think about present information and demonstrating stuff for about 20 minutes or 30 minutes. And when they're longer, sometimes it's because question and answer, text, chat, things like that. So there's vary across the different academics that do it. They vary the length a little bit, but I've always tried to encourage folks to sort of keep it to 20 minutes, half an hour. But yeah, it's interesting how that varies a bit when you give people the autonomy to do what they like. How many participants does such an online event involve? It varies a little bit, and that is a really useful thing to say because for some of the stuff, if it's an optional option, we might get 10% of the module. If it's an assessed option, we might get 50% of the module live. But then if it's an assessed item, it tends to get 100% of the module will watch the recording and between the recording and the live to participate. So it varies a lot, but it's the positioning of how much it's tied to the course. So if it's an optional thing or if it's an assessed activity, it definitely does directly impact on the participation. But let me just roll down through this because I don't want to go into Sarah's time here. But yeah, with the analytics graphs here, for any of these widgets that we use, we sort of get a graph as to see how people are participating as they go through time. We've just built that into the system. We get some information like which platform they're on, if it's Windows or Macintosh, which browser they're using. And then for each of these little widgets that we're doing, we get a sort of summary illustration of it. And also we get the frequency response. So it's just a way of us logging this data. And we found that really useful as a way to try to analyze and understand people's engagement with these processes. And we've had a colleague who recently completed her PhD, which is looking at some of the teaching strategies that are used across the different subjects when they're teaching through this platform. And that's something that's been quite quite an interesting piece of work just in terms of teaching strategies and approaches across the STEM subjects. Okay, so that's my little bit in terms of the system. The last little bit here is to maybe just very quickly play a little bit of one of these presentations, and I think, Sarah, you're going to be up in a second if you're ready. There's an example of that field case. Oh, I'll switch the sound down on that. But this is just an illustration of one of these presentations, and Sarah's going to speak about this in a moment. You can see there the academics are setting the system up. Here's a fast forward to these little widget areas, and typically we'll ask people to make some of those decisions. Let me see if there's any of these where I can find the little widget thing as well. Oh yeah, there's an example of that widget. Students are responding. Okay, so folks, let me stop that. And I'm going to hand back to Sarah. So my little summary of my points was the key thing of what we've been doing is broadcast video rather than video conference. So the quality of the video is very good. There is a little bit of buffering delay, but we choreograph that into the design of what we're doing. The text chat enables the students and academics to talk to one another, and those polling widgets is a nice way for the students to participate. There's low risk, no stakes, and they can always change their mind as well. In terms of the things that matter and why we're doing this, why we think it's been helpful. For us, our students don't necessarily get to know our academics. They'll see what they've written, they'll see some of the recordings, but won't really see the personality. And that certainly comes across when we're doing the broadcasts. The academics are also given that opportunity to model the kind of the process, the professional practice of the subject, sort of inquiry, and that sort of curiosity that goes with that. And then also the thing that's been really useful, we've noticed, is people making mistakes. Students love it when the academics make a mistake with their sums or, get something wrong, and they need to think on their feet. And the process of watching the professionals do that, I think, is a really useful learning thing. And it's really nice to see that when the students engage with that and sort of see the human side of it. And then it is that enthusiasm. We can't stop people's enthusiasm. It's a wonderful thing, and we should celebrate and share it. Right, I'm going to come off the camera now and let Sarah pick up the baton and carry on with this. But just a couple of thought prompts there as I leave you. Have a think about this, and maybe we'll chat at the end around, what sort of practical and practice support do you give in your context? Well, do you take people out in the field, or you do lab work, or how does that play for you? What opportunities might there be for this sort of student-led inquiry? And that'll be something that maybe comes up in Sarah's explanation of the way that they've been doing field work, is that we try to get the students to lead this work. And then the last one that I've added in there, just as a thought prompt, is for us to think about is, what kind of scaffolding might we need to put in place for building students' confidence? This is one of the ways that we're trying it at the OU as part of the blend delivery, but it'd be really good to hear what other people are finding useful. Okay, I'm going to thank you all very much for the participation. Thanks for the chat. I'll have a little pick up on that as well, but I'll hand over now to Sarah. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you, Trevor. So I'm just sharing my screen now. So hopefully you can see that.
Yes, can see it fine, Sarah.
Brilliant, thank you. Right, so so I'm Sarah Davis. I'm an environmental scientist, a lecturer at the Open University here in the UK. I'm going to talk about what we call field casts, so using this technology for fieldwork learning. Oops. So I'm going to start off briefly talking about the background, fieldwork and distance learners, what the problems might be. Then go into some of the specifics about the environmental science field casts that we've been running for a number of years now. Talk about how we use a scaffolded approach to help us and the students through this process. What sort of communication strategies are useful when you're working with students in this particular way, and end up with a few little things for us to think about a little bit further. Cool. So fieldwork and distance learners. Fieldwork in areas like environmental science, geography, earth science, even archaeology, is what's called a signature pedagogy. So it's a way of introducing students to the practices, the concepts and the values of the discipline. It's seen as absolutely critical as part of that particular subject. And very often it's something that attracts students into these sort of topic areas. But for distance learners, but also for students with additional needs, fieldwork can be challenging. So distance learners will be very often living far from a field site. We have students all over the UK, but we also have students in other countries. So, you know, they can't get to us easily, although we do have residential field schools. We don't have very many of them because of the nature of distance learning, obviously. So, you know, we need to think about how we get students involved in fieldwork when it's something that they're probably quite inexperienced in. Very often they won't have met their classmates face to face, so that can be tricky. When you're taking students out, they might have extra costs just to get to the field site in the first place. There might be equipment or clothing. So these are a whole range of barriers. And then when we're talking about individual circumstances, students with neurodiversity, students with various disabilities that might make it hard for them to carry out traditional field work if they might have mobility issues or fatigue. Those with caring responsibilities who can't leave a particular location very easily will find it difficult to get out to a field site. Those from socially deprived backgrounds, again, find it difficult to get to these locations where we might want to bring them all together to do field work. And a lot of students experience anxiety. This is a new, different situation for them, which can be really challenging. So students at the Open University have the opportunity to take part in a range of different types of field work. There's virtual field work that they can do through a computer screen. There's residential field work where they can come to a site. There's also field work they can do in their own locations. But as I was trying to explain, this can be really tricky. So one of the things that we're using the Fieldcast for is to try and help induct students into fieldwork and take them through a fieldwork process. So the environmental science Fieldcast themselves, we like to think of them as practical fieldwork experiments. They're accessible for distance learners at scale. So Trevor was explaining to you how the system worked and that you can get a lot of students to interact with us over the internet, whereas you couldn't take 200, 800 students out on a one field trip, but you can do that online. So these, excuse me, so these are live interactive events, and that's really important to us, that the students have a role in this field work. So we think of these events as student-led. So there are decision points where students actually choose what's going on and drive the investigation themselves, which is really critical. Another thing that we're really keen on, that this is authentic learning. So we're using real environments and we're using real data. So it's not something that's made up. It's not just an online environment. It's a real environment, and that's stepping students through to carry out the investigation themselves, and then later on down the line, if it's something they're more interested in, they can do more of that work themselves. In the environmental science Fieldcast, we have 3 episodes dealing with different topics of a scientific field investigation. So first off, we start with observation and hypothesis, then study design, data collection, and then finally data analysis and interpretation. So you can see some of the images here on the right, very similar to what Trevor showed you. There's what the students will see on the screen. So there's the chat on the right, there are the little different widgets that students can interact with to help drive the investigation. And there's the panel that has the video, the live feed from the field, which is us talking live to the students. And again, there are some more of the different widgets shown here. So the one on the right with all the words on it, probably looks quite small to you. That's a Wordle, so students are encouraged to, as we're walking them around the field site, we ask them to think about what is interesting about this field site, what they would like to investigate. Okay, so what they do then is they type in the words and we see what things that really interest them about that field site. And we've done this a number of different times, and students always come up with something interesting, something you haven't thought about. And then what we do is we pick the biggest topics, the ones that have the most votes, and we carry out an investigation from that point. Okay, so there are various different points during this process that we get students to make these decisions about how to drive what we're actually investigating for them. So we're giving them information, we're providing them with the context of the environment, and then we're saying to them, what do you want to investigate? How do you want us to investigate it for you? What samples do you want us to collect? How should we analyze them? How should we interpret that data? So definitely very student-led. We like to call it choose your own adventure because they really are driving it. So the event is live to students, but it's also available as a replay for those who couldn't get there on the day. And also students can look back at it afterwards because this feeds into their assessment, so they can review what they did before. So this is just a little bit about some of the student participation. In the first 3 years, we were trialing the system, and it was optional for students. It was just an optional extra. And then later on, it became part of the assessment. So the assessment is compulsory, but attending live isn't. So students can either attend live or they can watch the recordings afterwards. And this graph shows you the number of views live and recorded versus the cohort size, the number of students on that module. And I've put up some quotes. We asked them at the end of the sessions what they thought about it. Again, we have a little Wordle that comes up, and what the highest, the largest number of comments that people put up were informative, helpful, enjoyable, fun, interesting. So it's something that really does engage students. On the right, we do some surveys afterwards to find out more. And so we have longer quotes from students. They enjoyed the interactive elements, and they thought it's a really interesting idea to do what we call a crowdsourced experimental design. And they found it inclusive, really inclusive. So talking about a scaffolded approach, this is how we think of engaging our students with the open possibilities of fieldwork learning. So it's very flexible because we are responding to student decisions and student input, but we need a set investigation process to be able to manage the whole thing from our side. But it also shows students the set process you would go through in a scientific investigation. You would make observations in the field. You would then come up with a hypothesis. You would decide what samples you're going to collect and how you're going to analyze that data. So that sort of process is set. But within that, students might decide they want to investigate soil, plant species, water, temperature. You know, it can be a whole range of environmental things that they want to look up. So we prepare for these different options. Oops, sorry, clicked the wrong thing there. And key to that from our point of view is being prepared. So we have a reconnaissance at the start. We're very well coordinated with running sheets. Everyone knows what everyone else should be doing. And we go through a full rehearsal, because that really does help if you're doing presenting work. We also demonstrate a think aloud collaborative approach between ourselves as lecturers, demonstrating the values of group working and operating in an environmental discipline. And a comment we had about that from a student was that seeing the thought process behind the experiment from start to finish from us, from the module team, was really good. As I said before, it's a co-developed scientific investigation. We need that student input for the process to move forward. As one of my colleagues says, we need them to have a go, because we can't get any further without their engagement. We're stuck here in the rain, usually, waiting for their response. One of the things that we want to do is make this easy for students to overcome some of that fear and anxiety they might be feeling. So the voting is anonymous. They can change their mind if they want to. And also we want to demonstrate a positive attitude. So sometimes we put ourselves in a situation, things might not have quite worked out. We're not quite sure what we're doing. But we demonstrate that we can cope with that. That's fine. It's okay to be a little bit unsure, to have time to think, to come up with an answer. You don't always have an answer right there with you, but that's just absolutely okay. So communication strategies. As well as the physical distance between us and the students, there's this psychological distance. And we need to use some strategies, some communication strategies to overcome that distance. And these are linked to effective and cognitive engagement for the students. So we've had some research done on the field casts over the years, and one of Trevor Collins' students, Benicia Brown, was looking at what sort of strategies we actually do use in the field, and there are a range here. You can see them all. And particularly with the field casts, what was found was that humour and encouraging participation were two of the critical elements that we use really frequently to overcome this psychological distance between ourselves and the students. But there are a whole range of other strategies that we use. Appreciation for what the students are doing, praise when they come up with answers or with questions. So I was talking about the widgets. So they vote with widgets to drive the investigation, but they also come up with questions, things we might not have thought about. And we do this live. So we have 3 lecturers presenting in the field. That allows us to explore the field, but we also have a 4th person who's sitting on the chat and relaying any student chat questions to us. So sometimes they will come up with a question we haven't thought of, and that's absolutely brilliant. So that is so we can praise them for that, and hopefully that, you know, we can promote their further engagement with the field work, with this process through that. And finally, the one I want to mention at the bottom is sense of belonging. Something that's very often difficult to get to encourage for distance learners is to help them have a sense of belonging as a student, as part of the university, with their cohorts, with their lecturers. And this is an event that we find really useful for helping with students' sense of belonging through these overcoming this psychological distance. Okay, some things to think about, sort of finally. Why would you want to use fieldcasts? A whole range of reasons that you might want to use fieldcasts, and you might be able to think of some more of these. We can get students to places that they might not be able to get to otherwise. It's very useful for building their confidence. They can actually gather and analyze real data. They can develop skills in observation, skills in choosing and coming up with hypotheses, in choosing sampling strategies. They're practicing these things in a safe environment. Another thing to think about is, how do students experience these virtual spaces and places? So they're not actually getting out in the field. We're the ones out in the field being their hands and their eyes. But it's important to remember that not everyone's experiences of spaces and places are the same. All students are different, and their experiences of virtual environments will often be different as well. And social and difference and inequalities can come through in virtual worlds as well as in real worlds or physical environments. So that's always something to keep in mind and to think about, is an equitable approach for different types of students. And also, you might like to think about, how else could this approach be used? Could it be used for other subjects? I'm an environmental scientist, so I tend to think biological, geographical topics, but there are a whole range of subjects that you might think this could be useful for. It could be useful for a range of environments, all different sorts of environments, indoors, outdoors. It can be used for other audiences, so for schools, for outreach, for public engagement, as well as for university students. A whole load of possibilities that you might like to think of. Okay, so that's all I have to say at the moment. I would like to give a huge thank you to the team behind this. So this is a list of some of the academics, developers, media people who've been involved in producing these fieldcasts over the years. But most of all, I would like to say thank you to our environmental science students, who are absolutely fantastic and really make this worthwhile. Okay, thank you. So now I'd like to hand over to Janine. You okay there, Janine? Brilliant.
Yeah, that's fine. Hello. Lovely. So hopefully you should be over my screen now. So while Sarah and Trevor have been talking about the model that the Open University has used, where students are involved in creating the scientific inquiries that students are doing, what I'm going to be talking to you about this afternoon is how we've involved students at Newcastle University actually in creating the live broadcasts themselves. So being part of that production process and being part of that presentation process as well. It's worth probably noting that our institution, Newcastle University, isn't a distance learning institute, but we are looking at ways of engaging students using different digital modes, especially in fieldwork, to improve the kind of quality of access to our fieldwork. So what I've been working on students with is creating their own live broadcast from a fieldwork environment. Now, the way we've set this up is that our students in their second year of their marine programmes, so these are students who are studying marine biology, marine science, marine zoology, they complete a employability placement. So they have a 35-hour placement that they go off to various places in the UK and overseas and complete a compulsory placement. So what I've been offering is a placement that works with me to produce a live broadcast. And you can see the brief that is sent out to students, and they apply to complete that placement with me. So the main kind of key points was that together with me, they would co-design, co-develop and co-deliver that live fieldwork broadcast to an intended audience. Now, when we sent out the brief and we began discussing this with students, actually what we got was a much more simplified kind of description of what this was all about. And for them, the students, it was all about a live broadcast that was for students and by students. And then interestingly, we also got this, and they were talking about Imagine Blue Planet Live, but a low-tech, low-budget version set in the Northeast. And that's what our live broadcast is all about, NCL Live. And so where we've been refocusing our development with live broadcast work is, can we achieve live broadcasts from a fieldwork location, but using very simple technology that we might already have in students' back pockets, for example, a mobile phones, a wireless internet connection, or a mobile internet connection as well. And so for the students who joined us, and we've ran this for 2 different cohorts now, so we ran it in 2013 and we've ran it in 2023 and 2024, sorry. And our individual students had specific objectives for their employability placement with us. And some of this was related to the kind of design elements of crafting and designing a live broadcast. Some of them had specific objectives relating to science communication, public engagement, presentation skills, but then also some of the digital skill development that they wanted to do using live broadcasting. And then there were some more transferable skills that students wanted to kind of develop, such as kind of project management, planning and organisation, teamwork and collaboration, and also communication, both internally and with external organisations as well. So each individual placement student has their own specific objectives that they work towards whilst working to complete that live fieldwork broadcast, which happens at the end of their placement. And so my first kind of prompt question to you guys is to think about those objectives that our students have on this live fieldwork broadcast placement. Are these able to be developed outside of a live broadcast placement? Are there other opportunities where students develop these, or are these new opportunities that are perhaps missing from some existing programme of studies? And does perhaps our live fieldwork broadcast placement offer the opportunities to develop those? So I'll leave that as a prompt there for you, one of our first prompts. So how we set up the 35-hour placement is we have it set over 9 weeks, and that's really important because this is actually quite a challenge for students. These are second-year undergraduate students, and in 35 hours they go from no knowledge of live broadcasting to a fully developed and ready to deliver live broadcast. So it's important that we don't kind of do that over a very short space of time. So the 35 hours are spread over a semester, over a 9-week semester. And we have quite a programme of study to take them through that development process. Some of that happens in person, but a lot of it happens remotely as well, using synchronous and asynchronous tools. So we might have some online meetings, we might have a project management board that we work from. So we've used Trello boards before, so that we can track the development of that project asynchronously, as well as having maybe a Microsoft Teams group to kind of chat through as well some of the conversations that we have as we develop it now. We've also been really lucky to draw upon the experience of others in this. So Trevor in particular was instrumental in kind of guiding some of the tech side of this for us, and also other organisations such as the Field Studies Council to support our students in having some training on delivering live and how do we talk about field and deliver fieldwork, because this is quite a novel concept to our undergrads. So again, another prompt that you might want to consider is, so like I said, Newcastle University isn't a distance learning institute, but how might this approach, this kind of 35-hour placement over 9 weeks, how would that work in a distance learning institute in your own context? So that might be, again, another thought for consideration. So I saw on the chat there was some discussion there about whether Trevor had considered in what he was sharing a version that would involve kind of web streaming, so Zoom and using Menti. And what I'd say is we've been using something similar to that, but with a little bit of kind of production element in it as well, because we were very keen on keeping it as low tech as possible, using more familiar tools to our students. So I'm just going to share a little schematic with you, which shows how our tech has worked when we've been developing NCL Live. So the first thing is we've had kind of 5 distinct roles in this. So we have our viewers, which are our students. So these have been actually A-level students, but also first year and second year undergrads. So it's a bit of a peer-to-peer broadcast. We also have our camera operator. It's worth noting that this is actually filmed on the live broadcast is filmed on a mobile phone. We have our presenters, so we have a primary presenter and a secondary presenter, with the secondary presenter acting as a moderator to some of the comments as well. And we have a live producer, which is not a person who is in the field. They are in an indoor environment back on campus, but they are live producing the broadcast that is being recorded and filmed live on location. So what we have is an outdoor network that's set up that allows us to stream live from the field. We use wireless microphones to enable our presenters to pick up that through our camera operator being filmed on our mobile phone. We use a Zoom call on our mobile that goes straight through to our producer who is on campus on the other end of our Zoom call. But what they do with that live video feed through Zoom is they put it through a live production software. So they use OBS Studio, which means that we can add a bit of production element to it. So it isn't just a Zoom call. We can add graphics, we can have some pre-recorded videos in there, we can have image overlays, we can have title screens, those type of things. And then it's streamed to our viewers through YouTube Live. We have ways of interacting with our audience using the YouTube comments, but also using Mentimeter throughout it as well. And then we also have in-person chat. So like Sarah was saying with some of her work, is that our presenters talk to each other, and that's really nice for our audience to listen to and hear that discussion. We also have some more informal methods. So we use whiteboards in the field so we can tell our presenters, right, we're live, 3, 2, 1, countdown, those type of things. And we have a WhatsApp call going on as well between our Zoom call, WhatsApp message, sorry, between our producer and our camera operator. So again, we know when we're live. So these are all quite familiar technologies to our students, but what they probably haven't used them in this scenario is in the delivery of a live broadcast. But most of the things, YouTube, Zoom, WhatsApp, are things that they've used before. The thing that's different is the live production software. So that is a completely new area that some students will develop as they're looking at. It's probably worth saying that when we started this, we didn't know whether it would work. We didn't know if students could, in 35 hours, design, develop and deliver their own live fieldwork broadcast. I'm pleased to say it worked. It's a bit worrying when you first start something. Are they going to be able to develop the skills? Is this actually going to work? But they were able to do that. And what part of my research has been is to kind of track the progress and track the experience of those that participated in that live broadcast placement and what did they gain from it as well. So been conducting lots of interviews with the students who've been participating in the placement itself. So not the viewers, but actually what do students get from developing the live broadcast and then delivering it to their peers. And you can see some of the things that they've enjoyed there, but also the things that were challenging. And this is because lots of the things we're looking at on this placement were very new and novel to students. They hadn't actually done any education development work before. So yes, they're learning lots of content, but they hadn't necessarily translated that to a different audience. In this case, their peers or A-level students, 16 to 18-year-olds. But they hadn't necessarily done that before. So that was something that was quite new to them as well. There was also that element of kind of the unpredictability or the uncertainty of being live. That felt a little bit more high stakes to them than delivering, say, a presentation would to their classmates, because it was being streamed live, going out to an audience. So again, that was something that was a little bit kind of novel and new to them and was challenging. But it was nice to see that the students actually got a huge sense of achievement from it. You know, the actual end result of creating something from scratch that they then presented was a real positive for them as well. And they also had lots of things that happened in the broadcast placement that were completely new to them. So that kind of freedom and independence, the fact that it was very different to lots of their other university work that they were doing. And in particular, they really enjoyed working as a team to develop the live broadcast. So there were some nice comments about how they'd done group work before at university. They didn't really enjoy it as much, but actually this was a different environment, a team environment. And it was one of their first instances of working in a positive team environment as such. So we've got some nice kind of quotes here from students, so I can let you have a little read of there, but some of the key points for it is very much that kind of designing it all from scratch, freedom in what they were doing, choosing what they could do from start to finish. That was really quite kind of an exciting aspect for the live broadcast placement. We've also been asking them to reflect on, the level of control that they had in the placement, and how would they describe the partnership that we developed to create the live broadcast placement. And early on in the process, so interview 2 happened in the kind of the second week of the 9-week placement. And we had a much broader spread of how they would describe the partnership process between myself and the other placement students, where, they felt they had some control, but they were of certain kind of prescribed areas. But then as we progressed through the kind of process in our interview 3, so this happened in around week 6, actually the students did feel that they were in a partnership, okay, and they felt that they had control and they had influence, and actually that influence was quite substantial in what they could decide to do within the live broadcast placement. And that was really nice to see, that they kind of narrowed their understanding of the partnership and really felt that they could drive the decision-making process to create that live broadcast. And again, we can see this in some of the quotes that we've got in here as well. So this student saying, obviously we've got a massive say in what happens, the direction that goes in, but also so do you. You're helping, you're guiding us, but I think we've been given lots of freedom. And again, that was something quite novel, quite new to students who perhaps are more used to getting a prescribed assignment. Actually having something much more open-ended was quite novel to these students. And we were also evaluating, well, the placement of a live broadcast, so completing a placement to produce that end result of a live fieldwork broadcast. Were there aspects of it that promoted partnership values, and were there aspects that perhaps didn't promote partnership values? And what we found on the whole is that aspects of the live broadcast placement promoted partnership values. Students felt empowered, they had a sense of responsibility, they had a sense of community in what they were doing, and they also felt that there was kind of a right level of challenge. Okay, it was high, there was high expectations, but they were able to meet that as well. There were some elements that were a bit more challenging and perhaps did not promote those partnership values. So initially there was a little bit of conflict where they were seeing the kind of placement supervisor or the facilitator, myself, as the approver. Is this okay? Is this the right thing that we should be doing? And actually what we wanted to develop was a collaborative response. What do we think as a team? So that was something that we were kind of working on to kind of address throughout the placement. What I would say as well is one of the other aspects that did not promote a partnership value is that we actually had quite a low audience for this. In the first year, we weren't quite so concerned about that because we weren't sure it was going to work. It was a pilot. But in the second year, we were really wanting to kind of spread this much wider. And the uptake for watching live the broadcast was quite low. And I think partly that's because we aren't a distant education institute, but also we were broadcasting it out and it was optional to watch. So it was, an optional extra that happened in enrichment time. So it wasn't a kind of thing that the students had to come along to. But what was really nice is, we've got quotes like this, the sense of achievement really came through. I was shocked that we were able to come up with that many ideas, and we were confident enough to share what we were thinking throughout. So again, a very positive experience for the students to deliver their own live broadcast. What I would say is that this didn't happen in isolation. So yes, we had our core team, but we had a variety of people to support us. And what was really nice is that our 2023 placement students actually came back as mentors and supported our placement students in 2024. And that was really nice for them to do some more peer-to-peer work through that process, using their peers who had gone through this process previously. So the last thing that I'm going to leave you on is part of this. We were also asking the placement students is, what value did they see in live fieldwork broadcasts, and where else would they like to see live fieldwork broadcasts being used? And they were actually sharing some of the future possibilities and the potential impact that this would have as well. So they saw value in partnership work with overseas organisations. They saw value in perhaps, the overseas field trip that might occur where students have to make a choice about where they go. Actually, could we link those up? so we reduce the cost element, or actually we can increase the number of overseas visits that we do because we can do that through live broadcasting? Can we open up the kind of black box of research and get maybe PhD researchers, lecturers in the field doing their research? Can they be live broadcasting to students as well to find out more about research and not just read about research in journal articles, but actually find out about it while people are doing it as well? And like Sarah was saying as well, some roles here to do with citizen science or outreach work as well. And we can see some of the potential impacts that this live broadcasting, this low cost, low tech live broadcasting on fieldwork could achieve with equality, diversity, inclusion, addressing some sustainability issues that we might have in fieldwork, enhance the overall experience, but also maybe think about, can we be research focused in some of our teaching work as well? And I'd be interested, again, like in the other prompts, to think about what are your views on some of these future possibilities, and do you see any other future possibilities? So leading on from Sarah's thoughts on where live broadcasting could go. So that's the kind of end of my session, and I think it'd be really nice now. I think we're all going to come back on camera and maybe have a look through some of the questions that we've got coming through. So I'll stop sharing and we should be able to see those.
Thanks very much to Trevor, Sarah and Janine, I think, for some really interesting talks. And I hope everybody, judging by the chat, people were really interested in what you were all saying. I've picked up a few outstanding questions from the chat, so maybe if we just go through those first, would that be okay? And obviously, please keep the questions coming in either in chat or in the Q&A, whichever of the buttons you prefer. So one for you, first of all, Trevor, was, can Stadium Live be used outside of the Open University, or is it just an Open University system?
Sure. So that's a great question. I get asked that sometimes. The way that we've implemented it, we use the authentication of the student sign-in. Those screens that I was showing you, you could see that I was already signed into the thing. So it's not easy for us to share it with other organizations. We've used it with schools and stuff where we've been able to set up guest accounts for people in order to give them access through to it, but it's not something that's sort of in a ready state for to sort of license out or kind of support through to other institutions. So what we've been doing in contexts where people are interested, like chatted with Janine in various times and other people as well, this idea of sharing, ways in which we could make it work in other contexts and stuff. So the way that Janine has taken this on and like done so much with it is brilliant, because it is that example, folks, of trying to make it work in your context. So although that system that I was describing, effectively it is a video stream and some way of interacting, and there's so many tools that we can use to make that happen. So at the university, at the Open University where we are, one of the things we're thinking about now, rather than maintaining our own system, can we deliver something equivalent to that in tools like Adobe Connect, which we're already using for tutorials? So can we embed the video broadcast into an Adobe Connect session and then use the interactive tools within Adobe Connect? Or, similar things are available in Teams, they're available in Zoom, so why don't we look at ways in which we embed the video into those? It is a wee bit different in terms of the video conference call. The quality of the video that we get now isn't as good as we can get when we do the video stream, the sort of the live streaming thing, and that's why we go for that approach. But yeah, so sorry, that was a long question, a long answer. I'll be much quicker than the rest of them. But yeah, sorry, the tool isn't there as a sort of an open tool as such, just because we had it sort of tied into the OU system. But I'm very, very happy to share approaches and ideas and get other people up and running with this stuff, because we'll only learn by doing it together. So please get in touch with us if there's any interest for that stuff.
Okay, thanks, Trevor.
Thanks.
And I suppose maybe a couple for you, Sarah, maybe around the sort of field cast approach. So there was a question there about, do you have collaborative group assignments, within this this area, or are they all just individual, the work that the students are doing?
Right. Okay. So for this particular assignment for the field casts, they all write up the same piece of work. You could think of different setups where you might make it collaborative work with smaller groups, but the way we've set it up at the moment is the whole class votes on the investigation and then writes it up individually, writes up the report. So they take the data that we collected as a group but they write up their own individual reports. One thing I spotted on there was someone was talking about a drone, and could a drone be involved with archaeology and landscapes? Yeah, absolutely. We did have a drone once that we used, which is actually really useful for these sorts of investigations, because it gives the students an overview of a site that they wouldn't get from a camera on the ground, even camera moving around on the ground. It gives them a different view. And that has been definitely very useful. I think we haven't been able to use it very often, but we'd like to use it more in the future for sure.
Great, thanks, Sarah. And I suppose another one for you, Sarah, is really around the types of data collection. You know, somebody was asking, is it just around observations, or what type of data collection do you do on the students' behalf when you're doing those field casts?
Yeah. So the things that they can do is make observations and ask us to make collections. So we've done. Let's try and think. Organic matter in soils. We've done pH of soils. We've done depth of litter layer in soils. Soils seem to be quite a popular topic. We've done species diversity and species richness. We are set up to do other things. You know, a few lab investigations. We could probably do some nutrient analysis in our labs that we have. We've got some portable equipment, so we could look at temperature, even some things like chlorophyll in leaves. There's a portable instrument that we could clamp to a leaf and do some investigations like that. Yeah, so, you know, depending on the equipment that you have available that you can use in the field, plus what you have available in a laboratory for, you know, as an academic to use, then you can give students access to that, which again is something that they find really interesting, the students, because they wouldn't normally have access to that sort of equipment in their own setting. So whilst we don't do really in-depth environmental investigations, we can carry out quite a lot. Trevor, you wanted to say something on that?
Yeah, it was only to add in on that. Do the lower hand thing because of the buttons. There was a comment in the chat about, you know, the sort of idea around lab work as well, and I was just going to say it's really interesting when we've used the same system in the lab, you know, to do lab demonstrations, get students engaged and discuss that. There's less flexibility than when we do it in the field site. You know, when you know, in Janine's context or Sarah's context, students can go anywhere. They can come out with anything, sort of thing, you know. And whereas once you're in a physical space like a lab, you are kind of constrained by the environment and the equipment and things that the academics have thought, you know, at hand. So there's a little bit more constraint around, but we try and keep it open. That idea that students being involved in making those decisions is the key thing around making it live, because otherwise, if you can pre-guess it, then you can pre-record it. You know, you don't have to do it live. So it's that participation thing. But it was just a comment on that. It is that nice comparison with the field and the lab.
Thanks.
Back to you. Sorry. Yeah.
And Janine, a couple of questions for you. One was just around the type of students that you have at Newcastle. Are they full-time? Are they part-time, mixture? So, you know, just let you answer that. And the other one was around, obviously the students are gaining quite a lot of skills there in the broadcasting that you're doing. Do they get any sort of certification? Is it a module? Do they get credit? You know, what benefit do they get from you know, doing that?
Yeah, great question. So our context of students, the majority are full-time students. So they're full-time students at a non-distance distance learning institute. But when they do their 35-hour placement, it is part of a compulsory module, which is a 20 credit module, so they get credit for it. So they have to do the module, but where they choose to do their employability placement, there's a range of different placements, and they apply to lots of different ones, and then they will go on a 35-hour placement with it. So it's really good because all of our students get an employability placement on something that they're interested in, and then from a kind of skills point of view, and how we try and track their skills development, is they complete a placement log, and a reflective placement log, and that's what is marked. So it doesn't really matter what they do on their employability placement or how successful their employability placement is as such. What is marked and where they get the credit on is reflecting on the skills that they have developed and how they would apply those to their future careers in marine science. So hopefully that answers that question.
Right. Hopefully that does. So I don't see any other, there was one question I think in the chat about managing the number. What about evaluation? What strategy for evaluating 800 students, online quizzes? That's a question from Paula there. I don't know if one of you wants to just talk a little bit maybe about how we assess in the Open University, or it might be useful.
Yes, I was saying that they have an assessment for that particular activity, the field cast. They write a report on it, so a normal field report that a student would write in another university. In the laboratory setting, I think that there are similar reports. Students can write a report on the data that is produced as part of the lab work. But there are other options. You could have sort of interactive online quizzes. We have different modes of assessment at the Open University, as I'm sure all of you have at your own universities, that could be used within this setting. So with 800 students, yes, that's a lot of marking. We rely on our wonderful associate lecturer colleagues, the students' tutors, to do that marking. But there are automated assessment marking as well that can be useful.
That's great. Well, thanks for it. I hope everybody's questions have been answered. If your question hasn't been answered, you want to pop it back in the chat or the Q&A box just in the last few minutes, please do that, because the chat has gone very quickly, but it's great to see that amount of interaction. I would just like to thank our three presenters today, Trevor, Sarah and Janine, for obviously the time they've put into preparing, and all for all the great work that they are doing, and obviously for Eden, for letting us host this session. I think there's just a few announcements to come up now on the screen. Hopefully we'll get some slides just shared for you, just about some of the upcoming Eden events. So hopefully people are aware that the Eden Annual Conference this year is taking place in Graz in Austria from the 16th to the 18th of June, which isn't that long away, but registration is still open. So there's a QR code there if you want to get further information about the conference, and it would be lovely to meet people there. It's a great conference. I've been to several, and I know other colleagues maybe here have as well. So please do consider that. There's also a workshop, the Eden Workshop, which is taking place this year in Romania on the 16th to 18th of October. There's more information to come on that. Obviously, that's a little bit off, but just to give you a head up for those dates, maybe if you're thinking about going, to put those into your diary. And there's a couple of other events I think coming up as well. The European Digital Education Hub have got basically, if you want to find out more about that, obviously click in on that QR code, and I think they have an event coming up quite soon as well, which is maybe the last slide, on ethics in using AI. And I should have said that the theme at the conference this year is really all around artificial intelligence, such an important topic that we're all, I think, dealing with, aren't we, in our institutions. So I think at this point, I'll just again thank all of our three presenters for today, and wherever you've joined us from in the world, I could see that a lot of the world was represented here today, so that's really good just to see colleagues from all over the world joining in this webinar. I'll just wish you well for the rest of your day, and hopefully to see you again at one of these webinars soon. Thanks.